we'll move on to Trump. So Trump testified yesterday in court in the New York
Like this
hearing.
was the New York one.
Yeah, this is the business fraud one.
There's so many cases. It's funny. I had to qualify. This is the New York one, right? We're talking the New York
one. It's one of the 5 ongoing, or 4 or 5. Yeah, it's hard to keep track now.
It's a lot to keep track.
So he testified. Of course, he came out and said he won, and it was all successful. But a lot of people had very different views about that. Basically, he got on the stand. He kind of pissed off the judge. The judge had to sort of talk him down. And then I think after a while, the judge just kind of gave up and realized, there's no jury. I'm the trier of fact. I don't have to prevent the jury from hearing erroneous evidence. I can sit here. So he just let Trump go off and wear himself out at the end. So the whole thing was just kind of ridiculous. But here, we'll watch a little clip of this from
kind of like a kid that's like kind of going a little crazy, or like, nah, just let that kid go nuts. In about an hour, they'll just calm themselves out.
Right.
He's not like that, right?
He's not my kid. I can't really punish him. I could tell you, if it were you or me pulling this shit in a courtroom, we'd have been detained and put in jail. If it were anybody else. But with Trump, he just kind of like, fuck it, whatever. I'm not dealing with it. But we'll watch a clip here at MSNBC. Oh, there we go.
Donald Trump taking the stand. The former president called to testify in the New York civil fraud trial, testifying under oath for 5 hours. NBC News reporting his rage came out on the stand today, and that he seemed restless,
love those pictures.
Also losing his composure as he lashed out at the judge. Trump saying the judge, quote, called me a fraud and he didn't know anything about me. Well, to be clear, he did not call him a fraud, but that did not stop Donald Trump from being Donald Trump. He also said to the judge, quote, you believe this political hack back there? We're referring to Attorney General Letitia James, and that's unfortunate. NBC News detailing he was, quote, losing it on the witness stand. And when he finished his outburst, the AG's lawyer asked him, quote, done? To which Trump replied, done. The only thing that I wish in that moment that the Attorney General's attorney would have asked him was, are you finished or are you done? That would have just really made my night, but he didn't. Despite Trump's antics, he actually made some major admissions about the fraud allegations on the stand.
That's what I want to get into. So, here's what happened. Last week, his 2 older sons, Don Jr. and Eric, testified. And they were basically running the company after he became president. Their testimony was, we didn't commit fraud. So the accusation, well, not even an accusation, the judge has already ruled that they did this, right? Is they would say that their properties were worth less when they were filing taxes, right? So they could pay less property tax. And then they'd say they were worth more when they were trying to get bank loans. Right? And so they had 2 sets of cooked books, essentially, at all times. And Trump would also lie to try and get on the Forbes list. Right? We joked about that last time, where he would literally tell people like, oh, yeah, I'm worth $3 billion. I really think I'm worth 6. And then they would take that as, okay, well, now we have to make it look like he's worth 6 on paper. We were talking about that last time. I think 3 and 6 are basically the same thing as what he tells Melania every night. But anyway, so Trump and Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, their testimony was, we didn't know anything. The accountants did it. We just signed it.
Well, that still makes you an idiot.
Well, no.
Even if that's true, which is probably not.
Well, you do taxes and accounting. Do you tell them what they're worth, or do they tell you? Do they give you the financial information, or do you give them their financial information when you're filing taxes?
Well, they don't tell me what they're worth, because most of them don't really know how to totally calculate that. But they give me the documents, and I use what documents they give me
to put it together
in order to complete a return that's accurate, but it's only as accurate as the information a client gives you.
Right.
So
that was the gag, is it wasn't
to that point, it doesn't make much sense. However, I mean, it seems possible that the kids aren't the ones who supplied the information and they did just sign off on crap. I mean, that in a big organization or whatever, that feels possible.
But they were, and it's not a big organization. The Trump organization's like 10 people. This is not a big company. This is like 10 people, mostly lawyers that are basically just moving money around. It's not.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they directly know. However, I gotta say, if I'm signing off on that crap, the accountant explaining enough of it to me for me to actually have a clue what it is. I mean, if you're not doing that, that's not too smart.
Well, I'm telling you, based on the accountants, their testimonies, the CFO's testimony, Michael Cohen's testimony, and even Eric and Don Jr.'s testimony, they're the only ones who could have given that information.
No.
So they did know. So now they're potentially looking at criminal charges.
Right? Then they're out of excuses if that's already, been established.
But at least they had sort of a defense, kind of. It wasn't a good defense, and it's easily disproven, but it was a defense in the sense that we were just saying, well, we just trusted the accountants to do everything. When everybody knows that's not how it works. Right?
Right.
So that was their defense. Trump's defense was, yeah, I changed the numbers. I have the right to do that. He got up on the stand and admitted that he committed the fraud. Not that we needed that information, but
let me put this in different terms.
Sure.
If I had a client say to me, as they gave me documents to prepare their tax return, well, I changed these documents, but I can do that.
Right.
Well, first I look and see, like, wait, what are they? You're not just giving me like, what are you cooking? You know what I mean? Right. Is this something you actually,
right.
can change or whatever? But yeah, I would be suddenly very alarmed, and I would potentially, if they were, depending on what they were changing, if they were changing something not allowable, I would kick that thing back. I wouldn't want my name on it. You know what I mean?
No. But what happened is in a lot of these cases with the accountants, what they told them, they said, look, we'd ask for these documents. They'd never give them to us. And then what we get is some half-assed memo or something like that. And we kind of forced to go off of that because we didn't have anything else. And it's not the accountant's responsibility to dig up that information. It's not the financial officer for the company. That would be his responsibility. But, I can tell you right now what I do, business consulting. It's not, if you tell me something that's not true and I don't know, how am I culpable? It's not my job to have to investigate everything my client says. Right? Otherwise, I'd never make any money. Because I'd be spending all my time trying to figure out if what they said was true. Instead of actually doing my job. That's the whole point here. The joke, though, is Trump got up there and admitted to cooking the books. And said that he could. Which he can't. And he knows he can't. And we know that he knows he can't because he never asked anybody to cook the books directly. He just implies it, right? Like a mob boss. That's been the whole testament. So he basically got up there and confessed. Because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. And he wasn't answering questions directly, but the DA just kind of let him go. Because wouldn't you after a while? If he's just confessing to shit? Not that they needed it. They've already won the case. The judge has already ruled.
I just let him keep talking because he's just going to talk himself into a corner.
Yeah, so the DAs didn't really object or much. The judge tried to get him under control. And he told the Chris Weiss, who's Trump's attorney, you need to get your client under control. And Chris Weiss, I can't believe he said this to the judge, said, well, you get him under control. And I'm surprised. Well, I think, though, here's the deal, is they were trying to piss off the judge, hoping the judge would do something that they could use to say, oh, it's a mistrial or whatnot in an appeal. And the judge just didn't give him anything. He just sort of let him take enough rope to hang themselves. And he just sort of sat back and let it happen. Well, I mean, it was a smart move on his part. I can tell you right now, if we tried that shit in court or anybody else tried that shit in court, we'd be dragged out of that room in handcuffs. But Trump gets away with it. But no, so we'll watch a little bit more of this because it was just bad. It did not go well for Trump. He says it did, so his followers think he's doing great, but anybody who followed the news knows he gets
asked by
screwed.
The lawyer from the AG's office if he ever thought, quote, the values were off in your statement of financial condition. Trump replied, quote, yes, on occasion, both high and low. Now, at one point, Donald Trump even agreed that the financial statements that were used to induce banks to lend money. See, and this is a point that's really important because it's key to the Attorney General's case against the former president and his organization. And earlier in the day, Donald Trump slamming the trial as he walked into court. Let's take a listen.
Whoops. Stupid commercial. 3, 2, 1.
It's a very unfair situation. This is really election interference. That's all it is. The trial is ridiculous. It's very unfair. But in the meantime, the people of the country understand it. They see it, and they don't like it. They don't like it because it's political warfare, as you would call it, or political lawfare.
Now, when reporters asked how the trial was going, Trump made a motion that was essentially zipping his lips. Attorney General James responding after Trump was excused for the stand for the day.
So, political lawfare, that's not a thing, buddy. He just likes to make this shit up. It's political lawfare. It's so unfair. Anyway, at one point I think he attacked. Go ahead.
Just like, I just kind of can't help it. I'm feeling the love for Letitia James right now, I gotta say.
Oh, then you would have loved this part because he attacked her at one point in court. And the guy sort of mentioned it when he attacked her.
Yeah.
And she just started laughing. Because she's got him dead to rights. She's going to get everything she asked for. She might get more.
She's very good and she's very put together. I mean, people may or may not love her, but she's very composed and she's got it together, you know?
Well, and it's the old saying, when your opponent makes a mistake, let him.
Right. I mean, but that's where I say, like, she's composed and that matters. That sounds maybe like a silly word to use for somebody in her position, but it matters. Oh, yeah. You know? That she's like, you know, she knows when to just like let that whole thing go, you know?
Anyway, well, Trump and his lawyers were that. I mean,